Why you wouldn't last a week in the 19th century. Let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. You wake up every morning, reach for your phone, check the weather, maybe order a coffee through an app, and take for granted a world that took centuries of suffering, innovation, and brutal trial and error to construct. You live inside a bubble of modernity so thick that most people genuinely cannot imagine what life was like just 150 years ago. Not ancient history, not medieval times. 150 years. Your great-great-grandparents were there, and if you were somehow transported back to that era, the uncomfortable truth is that the vast majority of modern people wouldn't survive even 7 days. Start with the most fundamental thing, water. You turn on a faucet and drink without thinking. In the 19th century, water was a vector of death. Cholera, typhoid fever, and dysentery were endemic in cities precisely because human waste contaminated drinking water with horrifying regularity. People didn't understand germ theory until Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch formalized it in the latter half of the century. And even then, public health infrastructure lagged decades behind the science. You would arrive in a city like London or New York, drink from a communal well or river source, and within days, your body, unaccustomed to those pathogens and lacking any historically acquired resilience, could begin shutting down. The 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak in London killed over 600 people in a matter of weeks from a single contaminated pump. You would be drinking from that pump. Then there is the question of medicine. No antibiotics. None. A cut that gets infected today is treated with a 10-day course of amoxicillin. In the 19th century, that same cut could kill you through sepsis. Appendicitis? Fatal. A bad tooth? Potentially fatal. Pneumonia? Very likely fatal. Surgery existed, but anesthesia was primitive. Antiseptic technique was barely understood even by the end of the century, and operative mortality was staggering. If you were unlucky enough to require any kind of medical intervention, your chances of surviving the treatment were nearly as uncertain as surviving the illness itself. And forget about the emotional comfort of a diagnosis. Doctors of the era operated on frameworks of disease that were fundamentally wrong. You would be bled, purged, given mercury compounds, or told your illness was caused by bad air, miasma, rising from the ground. Food is the next wall you'd hit. Modern stomachs are accustomed to refrigerated, pasteurized, regulated, and inspected food. In the 19th century, especially in urban environments, food adulteration was rampant. Milk was diluted with water, sometimes contaminated water, and colored with chalk or plaster. Bread was stretched with alum. Cheap cuts of meat sat at room temperature in market stalls. You had no way to verify what you were eating. No labeling requirements, no food safety agencies. Botulism, salmonella, and trichinosis lurked in everyday meals. Even if the food was technically safe by 19th century standards, your gut microbiome, shaped by decades of modern diet and exposure to specific modern pathogens, would likely rebel violently against what was on the table. Beyond the physical dangers, consider the psychological weight of the era. The 19th century was loud with suffering in ways that modern people are largely insulated from. Child mortality was catastrophic. It was entirely normal to watch children, your own or others, die from scarlet fever, diphtheria, whooping cough, or simple diarrhea. Grief was not a crisis, it was a permanent background condition of life. Workers in factories and mines labored 12 to 16 hours a day in conditions that would be classified as torture by modern legal standards. In many regions, slavery and brutal colonial violence were not distant abstractions, but immediate, institutional realities. The emotional and psychological armor you would need to simply function in that world is not something you can download. It is forged over a lifetime of exposure. And what about your skills? Think carefully about what you actually know how to do with your hands. Can you slaughter and butcher an animal, preserve food without refrigeration, harness a horse, build a fire in the rain, navigate without GPS, sew a wound shut, deliver a baby in an emergency? These were not specialized skills in the 19th century. They were baseline survival competencies that children absorbed through lived experience over years. You, arriving cold with a smartphone that no longer works and a brain full of information about things that don't yet exist, would be functionally helpless in almost every practical domain that mattered. The 19th century was not a simpler time. It was a harder time in virtually every measurable dimension. The romance we project onto it, the fashion, the literature, the grand architecture, was built on a foundation of extraordinary human endurance that we have largely lost the capacity to replicate. 7 days. Most of us wouldn't make it, and that's not an insult. It's a testament to how far the species has come, and a reminder that the world we take for granted is far more fragile and far more remarkable than we ever stop to appreciate.